Um, Guys, I'm gonna take a moment just to pause this episode already from the start to end. You might want to listen to it twice, double speed, double slow, just because we have an amazing guest today. First off, George Bryant in the house. Obviously, he's, accomplished much. I do want to just say, first and foremost, thank you so much for your service, George, your time in the military and everything like that. My brother's in the military. We have many brothers and folks in the team that we work with there. But you're obviously the host of the Mind of George show. Love it. You do some consulting. You're in the game. You're in the marketing game and everything like that. You've even had a New York Times bestseller kind of cookbook with the civilized caveman and everything there. We were getting very raw at the beginning of this. So what I'd like to do is just continue that pace. Yeah. And guys, for the listeners, if you got kids, maybe actually let them listen to it. Because we're going to do 60 seconds of truth here, George, as you introduce yourself. So we'll put 60 seconds on. You run that truth, man.
Yeah, man, and thank you for being here. And I don't cuss anymore. God took it off my heart. But, the truth is my truth in this moment is I get so annoyed when people intro people by their bios, because those are results of, choices that people make, but they don't define us as people. And I'd say they belong in the trash because, today at best, I'm like a C- ex-husband. I'm an A boyfriend. I'm a B dad, and just doing the best that I can every day. But I feel like more people get to celebrate their emotions. And I've had like 3 atomic bombs dropped on me today in my personal life. Separations happening faster. This is the last recording in this studio because I have to break it down today to move before I get on a flight. So I've been having breakdowns and panic attacks and using all my own models today to like hit my breath and come back home and just be in my body. And I feel like the thing that drives me the most nuts is that people don't normalize what it's like to be a human being. And my mission is just to be honest and open all the time, because these conversations are the ones that change the world. And, we have some incredible friends, and just the willingness to be real is the connection that's missing in the world. And so I'm humbled and honored to be here, and all the time massively insecure because I've been in this for 2 decades and I feel like I know less now than I ever have. And I feel more unqualified to teach than I ever have, because I realize how much more I have to go just to be a decent human being and man and make a difference in this world.
Well said, man. I mean, a lot to process even for me, you saying those things. I mean, how long have you been in that space doing your show?
So this is what's interesting. I had an office that I was supposed to have for 20 years and built it all out, and 6 months ago hung the last light. And the landlord called me a day later and said, we had a family emergency, we need you out. So I moved it into this house. I was like, I'll be here for another 1.5 years. And then 3 weeks ago found out we're moving again, and I'm becoming a backpack princess again because I don't have a new office, can't handle the 2 rents for the whole family. And so moving in with my ex, still going to navigate it, and I'll be sitting out in the woods. I'll find a spot because all I need is Wi-Fi, a camera, and a microphone. And so, just being attached to the process instead of the results.
Yeah. It's funny because Seamus and I talk about that a lot, about the process is really what's been things that have led to positive changes, and we'll call them results for ourselves as well. But then as we embarked on a new endeavor it's really been kind of the last 6 months, right, Seamus? Really, was it November of last year? 7 months. And kind of an all hands on deck kind of situation with the other company we work with, and more travel, less time to do this, and like have the conversations that are helping, like, again, build relationships like in the 21st century. And we like literally felt like we were missing a part of us, like in such a way that, like you just said, it's like we don't care rain, sleep, or shine, or whatever. Sleet, not sheep, sleep. Doesn't matter where it is, as long as we have those things and they're on the calendar like 2-3 times a week, whether it's with us and or with other people. We need those. It's almost like bro time, man. Like podcasting is like bro time, where we get to have these super unique things, hear a little story about people, but also the coolest thing is you get to learn something, because everybody's a master of something different these days. And like I mentioned right before we hit record, was like, man, your website speaks to me. like in a way that like I think it's the flow. It's not overly salesy. It's like, you know, there's just something that was gravitating to. Maybe it's the color, like you said. You got to own that pink, right?
Gotta own
like,
it, bro.
But the you saying that it doesn't matter where it is, it's going to continue to go on. I'm gonna have a good time with it. Maybe find a new niche, new thing amidst all that. Have a different segment. I feel like that's something that me and Seamus always really enjoy and look forward to. So thanks for sharing that, man. Like,
I think if I'm going to be a master at anything, I'm a master at making more mistakes than everybody else. So I just have a faster process of putting my energy where it matters.
Good point.
I mean, yeah. Okay. So to that, then, like making mistakes, do you feel like the mistakes are because your curiosity is just stoked in these different endeavors, or
it's really even interesting, like just to even give context, right? Like when I joined the Marine Corps, I forged my parents' signature because I was homeless and I needed stability and structure. And like I only joined because it was the hardest thing I could find. And so I was going to do 30 years in the military.
Yeah.
And then hand out smiley face stickers at Walmart. And then, you know, God had different plans, you know, almost losing my legs, getting blown up 3 or 4 times, shot, traumatic brain injuries, all that stuff. And so even when I found out they were, you know, medically separating me, I accidentally became an entrepreneur and I decided to be a food blogger. And the only reason is because I was bulimic. And it's how I dealt with the pain. It's how I dealt, like I would be purging in Afghanistan to handle the stress of everything happening, leading my Marines. It gave me this like illusion of control. But the only reason I became a food blogger is so the internet could hold me accountable to eating healthy, to not be bulimic anymore. So then I do that. I become a 22-week New York Times bestseller, launch a #1 app in the world, get 1 million social media followers, drink ayahuasca, and in 24 hours realized it was completely out of alignment. And I gave it away, deleted social, and disappeared off the internet for 3 years because it was out of alignment. Yeah. And so, you know, the joke for me is like, you know, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And this illusion of a finish line was like the biggest trap that I ever fell into, or the illusion that I can predict the next 10 steps when in actuality, no step past the first one is clear until you make the first one. And so it took me like probably 15 years of being in this game. And like, you know, for you guys being in health and fitness, like I'm 5'7" and I was 271 pounds at my heaviest. I'm like 166 right now and ripped at 40, which bless the Lord that like I'm in decent shape and health. But I was just always attached to some version of a finish line or outcome or somebody else's perspective. And that's like a self-induced prison. And no matter how many times I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning or all these other incredible pieces, there's a difference between learning it and then knowing it when you're forced to become it. And you know, and then like you go read The Comfort Crisis and understand the power of a Misogi, and you see Goggins talking about it all the time. Yep, there you go. And really, it took me a long time to recognize that like who I was yesterday is already dead, and who I am today is who I choose to be. And you know, this false finish line, I think, just gets in the way all the time. And so for me, I just genuinely swing as much as I can. And I say yes to everything. You want to speak? Yep. You want to do this? Yep. Like I've never been trained to be a keynote speaker. I've never been trained to be a consultant. Never been trained in any of it. But yet they think I'm certified in NLP and hypnosis and all these things. I'm like, no. I just went to everything. Like I just said yes, and I tried it, and I tried it, and I tried it. And you know, the joke that I make with my clients is like, if you tell me you want to run a marathon, you don't get to go read books and watch videos for 6 months and magically show up on the starting line. I'm like, if you throw all that in the trash and put your tennis shoes on and go for a run, you're going to figure out what shoes you need and don't need pretty quickly. You're going to make progress pretty quickly. And then at least if you put your foot in the water, you're like, I don't want to swim in that pool anymore. And so I've just kind of, and I think a lot of it was baked in, number one, to, you know, really being self-sufficient with like drug abuse and social services and cops when I was a kid to try to survive from like 11 on, and then join the Marine Corps on top of it, where they're like, we're going to give you nothing and you're going to have to do everything and you're going to have to make it work. And by the way, pain is weakness leaving the body. And so, you know, I think the deep answer of that, or actually we'll go the other way since the name of the show, the macro answer of that is that the biggest challenge was most of my successes always came out of insecure fuel instead of out of desire for betterment, right? It was what the world thought of me versus like what I thought was in alignment and integrity with me. And so now I'm just like massively committed to my happiness and my values and my outcomes. And quite frankly, I could give a rat's booty about what anybody thinks of me. And so, you know, pink shoes, pink mohawk, covered in tattoos. I cry more than any other dude I know. I get made fun of for it all the time from my female clients. I'm like, great. Like, that means I'm just being me. And, you know, I feel like you learn for one of a few reasons, right? Like, you're either forced to because of pain, you learn enough that you want to, you gain enough that you can. But eventually, once you get into that point, you recognize that, like, at the end of the day, it's just you versus you, and no one else's opinions really, really matter. And the faster you grab that and start really owning who you are, and the more you practice it, the more confidence you get to do it. And sometimes that means you got to take big swings, right? Like, you got to have hard conversations. You got to go delete 1 million social media followers and give away a 7-figure business to Josh Trent when you don't have a backup plan because it feels so deeply in your soul. And so, you know, for me, it just kind of became the way that I live.
Well, George, I want to say thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for having the wherewithal to actually literally face 7 figures, a company, a 7-figure social media following, and literally say, no.
Yeah.
Face it and say no when across all social domains, everyone would say that's success. But George, that's fucking success. But here's the thing that I've learned, and I think I talked to this with Marcos. I don't know what it is, but when I turned 30, I just literally felt what you felt. I was like, I just want more peace. I don't really give a crap about like what social determinants there are out there. There's some things that I need, obviously. There's some things you got to do to get going. But I'm like, dude, I feel peace. Marcos and I, in this journey with the pod, every day I feel like talk about the things that really put us in the driver's seat of the things that we're curious about, the things that we want to grow, and just things have just been shifting in the universe in terms of just like coming to us in opportunities such as this conversation here. So I want to say thank you because people won't be hearing you if you decided to just keep going down that path of, you know, hiding your bulimia and then saying, hey, I'm going to use the 1 million followers to keep this sickness going just to lie to myself about like, hey, I'm going to have food in my mouth because like these guys are doing it. It's not genuinely you. So I appreciate that, man. I really like, man, that's freaking powerful point right there, dude.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important for people listening. Like, I hate bonding over trauma. I hate it. There's nothing I can't stand more. And the reason I lost in life so often is because I was too stuck in asking why. And all why stands for is who hurt you and who are you still giving your power to?
Yeah.
Because no matter what, the only way through is to choose a new action and choose a new behavior. But like, I don't tell people about like, oh, after I gave it away, I gained 100 pounds. I didn't get off the couch. My ex-wife was like, I'm going to have to get a job while she's 8 months pregnant. But it's really being committed to the process and really loving yourself in it. Because if I really, really go back and look at it, and you even just nailed this, right? I was just a prisoner of everybody else's perception instead of actually just being willing to own mine. And even when I was on that New York Times bestselling book tour, that's when I decided to tell everybody I'd been lying to them. And I was like, oh yeah, God doesn't like to make it easy for me. And he's like, no, now you're going to tell everybody when you're at the height of your career and you have to face every single fear. And so I walked on stage to give a keynote, and that's where that 60 seconds of truth came from.
60 seconds of truth. That's crazy.
And I was like, hey, I've been lying. And I had every fear, like every fear imaginable. My career's over. My publisher's going to sue me. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to do all these different things. And I faced every single fear. And the craziest thing happened. The moment I owned my truth, the exact opposite happened because it dissipated everybody else's power. And it was just me being me. And I love, Mike Tyson says this in a clip of The Rapper. And because he's like one of the best shamans in the world. And when you live like that, man, and then eat as many mushrooms as he does, he's pretty wise at this point. But the guy's talking about like, oh, well, they did me wrong, so I cut him out of my life. And Mike cuts him off and he says, you lost. The devil's your master because he changed you. And it like cuts to the core. because so many people, whether you're in entrepreneurship, whether you're in fitness, like whether you're just in real life, claim that they're doing all of this because they want more time, more money, more freedom. But yet if you gave it to them right now, they wouldn't know how to handle it because they think it's coming in the future. And the truth is it comes when you flex that muscle and you start facing it now.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big educated guy, right? I was a Marine, so there's 3 colors of crayons in my box: black, white, and pink. And so anything else, just a little too much for me, right? Like I was a trigger puller for my life. And I literally joke about this, but my son's 7, and there's this book that he had me read to him every single night, and it's called Bear Through the Woods. And it breaks my brain every time because it's like, you can't go under it, you can't go around it, you can't go over it, you got to go through it. And that's where, you know, purpose is created. That's where vision's created. And then you go the fitness route and it's like, yeah, we'll get on the treadmill and we'll push the number because we set a goal. And the moment it starts hurting, we tell ourselves a story that it's making us stronger. But then when we go into our life, the moment it gets uncomfortable, we tell ourselves a story that it's making us weaker, and we wonder why we don't get better at it. And it's really just the story we choose to tell ourselves.
I feel like I was listening to something the other day. I was saying something very similar to that about those ideas of, like you'd mentioned, like the journey's never done, right? Or rather, it's not the destination, but rather the journey, I guess you would say, right? To me, I think the thing I say often to clients is that life is a marathon full of sprints.
Yes.
Right. Like you got little things that grab your attention for, we'll call it nutritional periodization or performance periodization or business periodization. Doesn't really matter what it is, but there's periods, phases. And they were talking about this idea of like, as a kid, you have all these things that you kind of achieve. You level up and you get. You know, birthdays are a big effing deal when you're a kid, right? Like
now we forget when we even have one.
You don't even want them to come up because Seamus is like, I just turned 30 and I feel like I'm about to like move into this new decade and new stuff is about to happen.
Just going down, dude.
Yeah, but like, dude, you're about to, according to these guys, you're about to like have 2 more of the biggest things: buying a home and getting married, and then having kids, right? You're knocking 2 of the 3 biggest things that are kind of left in your life. And then the rest of it is just the monotony of adulthood, which sounds really terrible.
Yeah.
I know, dude. I'm turning that corner.
Well, welcome, my friend. You know, I'm just a little bit ahead of you because I got the house, I have the kids, I have the wife. But what else is next? And George, you're over here talking about these ideas of journey, you know, just long-term journey and long-term like identification or like looking at the self, right? And I turned 31 like a week and a half ago. And kind of the same thing happened. I was like, I'm older. At what point do I get to the place where I might be disheveled or crippled in a sense, like the people that I work with, you know, that are in their 60s? And that's not all of them. I mean, some of them are at their 70s and they are still kicking ass, taking names, doing things that I think is amazing. And of course, that's like what Seamus and I aspire to do from now until then and beat that, right? But technically, they're at set, like they have 40 more years of living in adulthood than I even, which, you know, I haven't even lived like 20 of them, you know, it's crazy. And all these things are just, I think the analogy that I would think of is like how hyperinflation is hitting us in this way that it's like, unparalleled and unprecedented. Yet everything that we've done as millennials, I think you technically qualify still.
I am.
Right?
I'm right at the beginning. Yeah, I still am.
Yeah, right. So everything that we've had and like learned about and do, like you said, your crayon box may only have 3 colors, but I mean, the life experience is, I think, far more important than the traditional education, man. Like I'm struggling with like, you know, I've struggled with wanting to go back to school because it's like, oh, I can maybe make a little bit more. It's like, well, I can go make a name for myself and just say yes, like you just said, about a lot of things in life and find out what is possible for me. Seamus, I know we've done the same thing where we like literally said like, why not us? Why not say that we are going after these things? And then if it doesn't have any prosperity, then we go back and we go do the other thing. Yeah, like, and yeah, I think now that things have settled down after our busy, 7-8 months, we're like, dude, we haven't been having a lot of fun anymore.
Yeah, we lost. I was talking about Desiree with my fiance about this, about like, because we're gonna see, we're having a family birthday, George, this Saturday. We're just talking about like childhood, and I'm like, And my fiance mentions like, it's interesting. I think people turn 30 and they start doing these like endurance events because they can kind of go back to their kids. Like they could do their half marathon in the morning and then they could do their things with the kids. And I'm like, when was the last time that I did an event, but then I could like sit back and relax and enjoy the event that I did instead of having to do the event, then go, okay, I got to get back to my life. When was the last time you can just sit down and just like enjoy the fruits of your labor? I don't know. It's been a minute. I got to put that back in.
I can tell you, Seamus, the thing about your mindset and also mine is that, I mean, we'll sign up for things because it gets us off our ass to do things for the next quarter. It's not even that we like doing the thing. It's just, it's a new challenge. And I think this is also, I mean, so I think this can even tie into like maybe George, what you do with your food now, right? How do you maintain 170 pounds roughly? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, dude. So this is so crazy, right? Because I was a competitive CrossFitter, right? Qualified for regionals. I did, got my RKC and kettlebell, did, triathlons, did all these things. Like I was like top fitness in the Marine Corps, perfect scores. But when I got out, it was 100 pounds up and down 3 times. And I was so committed to the intensity and trying to maintain that I never really, and this is going to sound crazy, genuinely asked myself what my goal was. I was fitting into everybody else's box. And, about 18 months ago, I really put myself through my own work because I lived in Solomon's paradox the entire time. I was so good at coaching it, so good at teaching it, and would never take my own medicine because I didn't really feel like facing it. And I put myself through my visioning exercise, and I was like, what do I want to do? And the only thing that came up was like, I want to be doing backflips with my grandkids when I'm 80. And it just changed something inside of me. And I was like, I've learned all this stuff in my life, but I'm overcomplicating it. And so I was like, how much food do I want to eat every day? And I was like, I'm an inner fat kid all day. I want my dessert. I want everything. And I was like, I picked a number. I was like, let's hit 2,700 calories. And I was like, all right, let's make this really, really easy. How much do I want to weigh? And I was like, 175. That feels like a good number at my height. And so I literally was like, great, 180 grams of protein, fill in the rest with whatever you want, and don't touch anything else. I didn't start working out, didn't do anything. I just saw what happened. And then I was like, what's the easiest way to not have to change any of this? Because this is a lot of food, and I'm having chocolate cake every night. And so then I put a treadmill in front of my desk, and I started taking my Zoom calls on my treadmill. And I was like, well, let's start at 7,500 steps. And at 7,500 steps, I was gaining a half a pound. Then I was like, let's go to 10,000. And then I was like, I'm maintaining. And I was like, let's go to 12,000. And then all of a sudden I was losing a half a pound a week. And so literally the only thing I adjust now is my steps. And I do most of them outside. I take calls when I walk. I only go to the gym 3 days a week. But, at 40, I'm in the best shape of my life. I can still deadlift over 400 pounds, squat over 400 pounds, but I don't. And I never will again. I do a lot of mobility. I do a lot of animal movement stuff. And I just do what feels good. I go hiking. And the only thing that I hit every day is my steps. And I keep my food the same so that I can eat what I love. I have fun doing it. And I don't know how, but magically I woke up one day and my girl's like, you do realize that you're ripped for 40, right? And I was like, really? And then the other day I got carded at a restaurant. I was like, how old do you think I am? And they're like 28. And I was like, I win. I'm 40 years old. I'll take it all day. But I was even overcomplicating that because I knew so much, right? I'd been in so many buckets and so many things. I was like, it's going to be this and this micro movement and got to add this and got to hit this. And I was like, what would the 80-20 rule look like in this? And I was like, so I picked the protein, I picked the number, and then I just adjust my steps now. And then if I have low energy, I eat more carbs. If I have enough energy, I eat more fat. And then, by the way, my guilty pleasure is mayonnaise. I am a mayonnaise sommelier. I make mayo. I buy it from all over the world. And I'm like, no, I want this on everything. And
you like aioli if you're making aioli.
I don't know the actual, even this is bad that I was a food blogger and a New York Times bestselling cookbook author. I don't know the difference between mayonnaise and aioli at all.
It's the same thing. It's just I think one has preservatives, if I'm being
so it's really aioli. I make it myself and I flavor it and it's so good and it's and so I want to enjoy my life and you said something, Seamus, too. It's the biggest trap, and I have a friend that was on my podcast, his name's Jamie Smart, and he wrote this book called The Little Book of Clarity, and it's on toxic thinking. And it's really, I'll start this when, I'll do this when, just like people in New Year, I'll go to the gym on January 1st. I'm like, why don't you just go for a walk today?
Yeah.
right? And this constant moving the finish line or putting this perspective in place to force our growth. I'm like, if you live it now and you embody it now, like you go read personal development books, Benjamin Hardy books, you go to personal development conferences, you go to a Tony Robbins event, it's really about be, do, have. And it's acting as if it's already happened. And fun is the most neglected part, right? Like life's journey is really simple. Why do babies cry when they're born? Because it's the first moment they're separated from God. I'd cry too, coming out of this devil's dominion when you come from, ecstasy. And then you spend the first 8 years of your life being innately curious until your paradigm's formed. And then the world tells you who you're supposed to be, and you operate in that box until you either have a meltdown or a midlife crisis. And then you spend the rest of your life remembering what it was like to be a kid. And then you go back to God. And I'm like, so let's just speed up the process. Let's skip the catalytic event and just be like a kid now and enjoy the ride, because you don't know when the light switch is going to get turned off.
That's a good point. That's a majorly good point. Go ahead, Marcos.
Were you listening to this podcast that I was listening to earlier?
I don't listen to podcasts.
Good point.
Podcaster. Hey, you gotta have. I like people's novel ideas. How else am I supposed to learn different things unless I'm having parasocial relationships, right? No, they literally said the same thing. Just like the landmark ages and different things happening, right? Like all the exciting things. At 16, I get to drive a car. Yep. Granted, I guess what are the generation they're currently in? Gen Z and Gen whatever.
I don't even know.
I don't know, dude.
They went to the Greek alphabet, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I think my son's technically and daughter are Gen Alphas. Why? I don't know. But same thing, right? Like, so you have milestones and things you're hitting and things to look forward to. But then this guy's like, I don't think you ever really age past 25 mentally. And I've talked about this a lot on our podcast. Like, dude, like, when is that moment of clarity where I'm like going to feel like an adult? I'm always feeling like a kid, except with aches and pains of trying to bend over and pick up a ball half the time. My back. So I think that is definitely something that is interesting to think about, like the formation of the brain, when you finally get like your frontal lobe fully developed, and then, the understanding of like, oh, like I can go learn new things. I think everybody like puts themselves in their own box of like, I can't do this, or I suck at math, or I suck at this. And like, I'm like, well, the old version of you, when you probably didn't care, didn't do well with it, but it doesn't mean you can't be good at it in the future. And I always use math example, George, because my background is math, and people are like, can't do new math. I'm like, you just don't know math at all. Like, but you can learn it. You already done it once before. Go back into that mindset where you've learned it and think about how you did it then. And what they're trying to teach, versus getting frustrated because you can't do it your way. And I think it's a good foil for what's going on in the world right now, because ultimately, like, the quote new way of thinking or new way of doing things is really just like, again, kind of being free. It's like you're free to make the moves that you think is going to allow you to get to a solution sooner. It's kind of like chess, right? Everybody be like, okay, based on this person's opener, I can really tell how he's going to play this game. But do you though? Or is it just like, I for one, I don't know why people would study like chess games as if like every game plays out the same way. Like, but yeah, like the things that I think people in today's society are, and I've wrestled with this a lot, just like in my thoughts, is that we're constantly finding ways of putting ourselves down in a sense, and we don't like to go through instances where we struggle, but it's through those moments where you have to become more vulnerable. You have to kind of reach out and ask for help. I have to do this with my wife. I have to find new ways to help her feel like she's carrying some of the burden that I've felt like I've had for a longer period of time here recently. And today she finally was like, oh my God, it feels good that have $3,000 in my business account. It's the first time I've seen that number. And that's after paying everything. I was like, it's a good feeling, isn't it? And I was like excited for her. Granted, I'll never tell her that because I tell her, go work harder. No, just kidding.
That's a good energy there, Marcos. Good stuff.
No, I'm being funny. But no, so she said that, and she's like, oh, I can't wait till it comes to 5. I think I can do that next month. And I was like, sick. Because it allows me to go after the things that I've far more enjoyed versus just landing more clients for myself. Because while I want to pour into people, I need to pour into the right people. I want people to like follow and listen to what it is I have to offer. Just like when Seamus, lands a new person, it's the same thing. Like, we know we don't mix with everybody, and it's become abundantly clear as we're becoming like trying to be board certified health coaches now, I'm like reading this material and I was like, I honestly don't know if I agree with everything that's happening from like the legalities of health coaching. Like literally I even asked Seamus this question. I was like, quote unquote, oh, I actually have to bring this up.
I'll say it because I remember this.
Yeah.
I was just doing but basically, George, in the health question flashcard, it goes, a guy comes in, it's his 9th check-in call with you, or like check-in with you, and he literally tells you the 3 things that were bringing him joy, which is reading, spending time outside, and like watching movies, is not bringing him joy anymore. What should you do? You have 4 choices. 1, you should tell him this. 2, you should tell him that. 3, you should tell him whatever. And the choice that you're supposed to say is send them off to a mental health, refer them to a mental health professional. I was like, what? Like, but like the first 2 choices were like, being the question, that the answer was being like a human, like, well, tell me about that or what's going on there. But they're like, no, straight up just send them to a mental health professional. And I have a problem with that because it's like, it just takes the human out of it. I think the relationships, I know you're big on that, George, right? Like, but the relationship is like, yeah, I get it. You're trying to do things by the textbook, and as a board exam person and like the board, it's a legality thing, it's a liability thing. But Marcos and I are like, we're here to help people and find ways for them to help themselves, and through conversation of coaching in the coaching check-in, help them figure that out. I don't know how them not finding joy in one weekend with the things that they don't find joy anymore. Oh, just go to a mental health professional. What does that do for anyone, right?
We're gonna get banned if I dive into this hole because it'll go for 8 hours. But my 7-year-old can teach this better than anybody, and I don't know where this came from. But I had a client at my house. She's a 7-figure entrepreneur. We're sitting at the dinner table, and she's crying, and she's like, I don't want to feel this way anymore. Like, I just want it to feel easy. I want it to blah blank. And he was 5.5 at the time. He had to have seen it like a YouTube short. I don't know. He told me he came up with it, and I got to believe him because who knows. And he walks over to her, and he asks for a piece of paper. And I'm like, all right, where is this going? I'm assuming he's going to draw a poop emoji, because he's a 7-year-old boy, and he's just obsessed with poop. And he draws a straight line on the paper. And he looks at her, and he said, if this was your heartbeat, what would it mean? And she's like, well, it would mean that I'm dead. And he's like, okay. And so then he draws a heartbeat. And he's like, if this was your heartbeat, what would it mean? And she's like, well, then I'm alive. And he's like, notice how it goes up and down. So do your emotions, and that's what it means to be alive. My 5-year-old dropped that on us. I broke down in tears. I'd never heard it. I'd never seen it. And like, quite frankly, we'll call it a byproduct or whatever. You can blame the internet, you can do whatever. But I even hate when people are like, oh my God, everybody's on their phones. I'm like, go look at trolley photos from the 1930s and everybody had a newspaper in front of their face, right? Like, it's really convenient to complain about it. But really, like, even at the lens of this podcast being macro and vulnerable and authentic, in order for people to want to be seen, somebody has to lead them to be seen. And it's this lack of human connection is like we're living in Wall-E, right? It's like transactional hiss, hit this checklist here, hit this blank. And then like, really, it's our country's problem. You go to like Europe and you ask them what they do, you'll never hear a profession come out of their mouth. They're like, oh, I hang out with my wife. I go do this for dinner. Like, they don't identify with like what their jobs are. They identify with who they are in their life. And so, yeah, I do. 3 of my former psychologists, like my actual psychologists, became my clients and now have private practices so that they can do the work that they want to do and not be held back from a system. But, sick and tired people make money.
Like that question, I was like, I feel like this is a typo. Like there was, this wasn't indicative of wanting to like explore further. They had a bad week. Dude, if every time someone had a bad week, I'm referring to them a mental health professional, that's a problem too. Like, then you're not actually trying to like just get into things that like, again, help with concentration. Because actually it wasn't even like the question I went back and looked at it, Seamus, is about that they can't concentrate. It wasn't even that they were having an enjoyment issue. It was the concentration issue with things that used to be enjoyable. So I'm like, okay, like again, but did
you not have a cup of coffee? Like,
did you forget your electrolytes, buddy? I don't know.
I don't know.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm like, oh, man, like what you're mentioning there with your son, the ups and downs, health coaching requires you to go through moments of ups and downs.
Yeah.
You know, like, and again, like, we're supposed to be testing theories on a relatively regular basis to see how your metabolism is doing or how your mind will handle it. You know, I can talk about my one client. She's struggling right now because I can't grind her at 1,100 calories in perpetuity. Like, that's not possible. I'm like, hey, we need to up your food a little bit. Just give yourself a little break. You know, about 250, 500 calories. Like, you know, there's a little bit of, and the thing happened where you started including some carbs. You retain a little water. I'm like, you're gonna be fine. You got to give it a little more time. You're gonna feel better. Your performance is gonna improve. We know this. We know this for certain. But, you know, we become so fixated on this number on the scale, and we think that, like, again, I'm like, no one looks at you and says, you're 160. You know what I mean? Like maybe me and Seamus will come in and be like, you know what?
Well, to be honest, my background, I'm always like, dude, ever since I started wrestling, like, I can tell someone's weight.
Yeah. Well,
like,
if you're a wrestler, come on. Like,
yeah.
It was kind of traumatically installed in you.
It's like, I know, like, because you'd size kids up from, like, you know, going all the way from middle school to college and then doing jiu-jitsu, you're sizing kids up because you're weighing in the morning at like 5 a.m., like, cutting weight, like dying. And you're like, now that guy's too big. He's 182s. That guy's 170. If he's cutting down from 170, I'm effed. He's probably the number one guy. Oh shit, he is oh. And then, you know, your fourth seed, so you're going against him first. You're like, I'm fucked. So, like, you're all these things, and then you start realizing, like, yeah, it's innately in you. But, like, that's the things that Marcos and I kind of, like, think about all day. Like, after you've been in, I don't like to say the word like trenches, but in the coaching capacity for so long, I think this board exam, like, we're just gonna get it for that title, but they just make it so complicated where it's like, dude, I'm just trying to be a coach. I'm just trying to get people to get results, like, as fast as possible. I remember Marcos, when we were doing this thing with precision nutrition, literally he was in a breakout room and he asked a question like, well, let me ask you a question.
Oh my God.
How do your friends look? And then the person was like, I don't think you should ask that question of how do your friends look. I'm like, why not? Because think about this, George, if we're talking about relationships across the board, and all the hype right now is longevity, VO2 max, muscle mass, whatever, all this stuff. I do that every day. Cool. Community and relationships are a bigger indicator of your lifespan, health span, and all that stuff than all the scientific stuff. So why is that question not justified, right?
I couldn't agree more. I'll go the safest answer, because if it was justified, people would be independent, sovereign thinkers, and then they wouldn't be easily manipulated into belief systems that generate trillions of dollars a year. That's the deepest answer of that, right? Like, we live in a fear-based economy. We live in a fear-based world. And so if you separate the ability for people to connect, like, dude, I miss the days. Like, I know I'm a little bit older, but I still feel like I'm 30. So, like, I'm in the bucket with you. Mm-hmm. But, like, I remember being at dinner and everybody making fun of each other for who they voted for. Not, I'm going to decimate, try to murder and slander you because I haven't realized that they're wings on the same back, and the illusion of control or choice does not equal freedom, right? Like, it's all of it. And it's like, what's lacking every single time is empathy. Because here's the other thing, and I hope and pray nobody ever has to experience things that certain people in this world experience, like death and war and witnessing those things. But I will tell you right now what happens. Every single belief that you think you have goes out the window when you're standing in a situation like that, and you very quickly realize the only thing that matters is people. Right? Like, the only thing that matters is people. Even if something catastrophic happened to this world and there was a zombie apocalypse or some other blank, every single label, fear, insecurity that people fight about, they judge themselves out, goes out the window, because we are communal creatures that are designed to thrive in that environment, right? And it's like just decimating people at the deepest level. False identities. I don't feel like this. I'm not good enough here. And so it drives me up the wall, because relationships are all we have. And I even say this in business to people. No one's going to come to my funeral, and my bank account balance isn't going to be on my headstone. And quite frankly, I don't care how many people show up. What I care about is how many people show up to silently support the people I love while I'm no longer here, because of the impact I had on their heart. Right? And, like, that's what's missing in the world. Like, Maya Angelou, like constantly improve upon the silence. But like you see these transactions, and I live in Montana on purpose. People get uncomfortable when they come here because go to a coffee shop and try to order a cup of coffee and not answer their question about how's your day. If you're like, it's fine, they're like, oh, what happened today? How can I help you? Like, I watch people crawl out of their skin here when they come visit from LA or Austin or anywhere else. They're like, why do I feel? I'm like, because people care.
They're finally
they're
seeing
connected. They want to know, right? Or like, how many times do we fall into the trap of like, we'll bump into something like, how's your day? You're like, oh, it's great. I don't say it's great. I'm like, oh, bro, it was hell. I got a flat tire. I spilled my coffee. I was late for 2 meetings and I'm still choosing to be happy. How's yours? And they're like, what? I'm like, well, why'd you ask me the question if you didn't want the honest answer? Right?
So
like there's this massive invitation for depth and presence and not this collection of notches in the bedpost of like how many friends I have and how many people do I know and how many blank. And it's like, we thrive on presence, but we have to be willing to go there. And I think it's rampant across the board, and it doesn't matter what industry, right? Like social media is not real. None of it's real. Like I wait for the day that everything's banned and people are forced to come back into real life because like it's gonna be a sobering day.
That's what's going on with high schools. They're banning those phones. I think here in California they're trying to do that. I just kind of saw that.
Are they putting in those little bags?
Oh yeah, I saw that too.
The things they do with like the comedy shows and whatnot. I think it's, again, like I get it. I get the separation anxiety with the phone, but I also get like there are certain things where life is better without it for sure. You know, actually, that's where I'd like a wearable that could just keep track of my steps that, you know, does some other health biometric stuff, but then I can leave my phone behind. But a phone is just the most convenient thing it literally does everything. It is like, I can listen to something, I can call somebody, I can do this or that, I can peruse for a couple hours and just bullshit and not have any actual real social relations.
Danger though, like you have such a sharp brain. Like I'll just say it, like we've literally atrophied our brains on our biggest strengths because we let something else do the thing. I miss the days where you had to print out MapQuest instructions and actually have to pay attention to figure out where you were going.
That's like the Dane Cook skit. That's all it reminds me of. It's like you're reading the MapQuest instructions, you're looking down. As soon as you pass the bump after the tree from the Mesozoic era,
but it's like it's so crazy. It's so crazy though because like, you know, Jim Quick's one of my dear friends and he's like a brain expert and I love him to pieces because he had some traumatic brain injuries. But like one of the things that he said to me a long time ago, and I still do it to this day, like when I drive somewhere, I take a different route every time. And I try to like get lost and like
you don't want the government to catch you.
Well, that too, but that's a whole different podcast. Whole different show right now. And then like I brush my teeth with my left hand. And like I'll try to do things like that to keep my brain sharp because like I really feel like it's a muscle and like we're in fitness, right? We're all in health. And it's the one that we have access to that has the most power and nobody ever flexes it. They let somebody else flex it for them and tell them what to think and then it atrophies. And I'm like, there's so much fun and power in like being alive and being an experience. It's like, I love when I go to my men's events that my friends facilitate because they take our phones and they block them away for 5 days. And everyone's like, bro, you look so peaceful. I'm like, oh dude, I've been practicing this for years. I'll see grown men in full meltdown acting like a whiny little kid, like they have no clue what to do. And I'm like, that's not healthy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I help coach in this program. I do like the fitness and nutrition. It's called Porn Reboot. But basically it's getting men to get control of their out of sexual behavior, especially around highly addicting pornography. But at the core of the program, and we've had the owner on JK on an interview, he goes, it's not the porn that's the problem. Like I'm trying to work with the person to really change their self-identity and who they are, and then how they appropriate themselves into their life with all this stuff. He's like, it's not, and it really reflects back on all these habits, routines, things that are really important. And he always says this, he's like, we're not a normal civilian. Like you have to do 10 times the work. You have to do these routines. You have to be strict with yourself for a certain time to really rewire yourself so that other factors are not controlling you. Like, for example, you see a beautiful woman, you don't awk at her. You can you can appreciate it, but you don't awk at her and sexualize her and then think about her and then like have this out of control behavior. And it's for you to take back control. And that's what he's teaching. And I think a lot of these forces on us, like work, for example, is the only addiction that gets like idolized. Like, dude, I go hard. I go hard as fuck. Yeah.
I'm like, why don't we just hustle dying 30 years earlier? Like, let's celebrate that. Why do we do that? Like, I rant about this all the time, because I tell you, like, and I tell entrepreneurs all the time, I'm like, you tell me you want more time, money, and freedom, but the moment you hit the false finish line, you're dead and can no longer achieve it, right? Like, why do we hustle about, like, I sleep less than you? I'm like, hello, early death, right? Like, hello, my brain doesn't function. Hello, elevated cortisol. Hello, adrenal fatigue, right? Like, there's so many things. But I mean, like, it's this weird thing because we also live in that society where there's always the one-upper, right? Like, you always need an increasing amount of hits and but all of that is just separation from self. Yeah. All of it's separation from self. And, like, you got to own it. But I mean, like, I joke with people too. I was like, listen, the fork didn't make me fat. I picked that thing up. It wasn't the fork that put itself in my mouth or, the 3 Domino's pizzas every night. Like, I made all of those choices, but the reason we lose is because we advocate our responsibility. And then really at the core of it, and you nailed this, it's because we live in a society that doesn't allow us to make mistakes. And so we internalize this guilt and shame and fault and blame. And then that creates more reactance, and it actually digs the neural pathways in deeper and makes it harder and harder to get out.
It makes it harder to make mistakes. Like, I think being a kid, you can make all the mistakes in the world. I mean, I was there for Marcus's kid getting hurt at like 10 p.m. at night in Vegas, and
dude, don't even get me
she was fine, bro. An hour later.
I forgot that you were there, dude. But it was also one of the biggest mistakes because I didn't go to my relationships and friends and ask them, what should I do in this situation?
Yep.
Just went to the system.
Yep.
And the system, I still have to pay this bill that's exorbitant, and all it was a little, hey, if you take the elbow and twist it in, it's going to pop back in place for that kid.
Dislocated elbow,
Yep, and I'm like, that's a $4,000 mistake. No, and again, like, it's not that it's like crippled me, but it's like, dude, now I'm paying this for the next year in perpetuity. It hurts. I'd rather have that $400 on my HSA to spend on myself and fucking get some massages or something, Pay my other buddy that I try to support his business. Instead, I'm paying. That's a whole other conversation for another day as well. But it was a learning moment. It was a failure moment because I didn't go to the relationship. But it was a learning moment. All through all the failures, I now know what to do. The first instance when it came to my son, when he had an upper respiratory issue on Father's Day, which was also, I think it was actually my birthday as well. It was like Father's Day and my birthday last year.
I remember that.
I'm in the ER with my son, but we tried to do a telehealth visit, and they're like, "No, you need to go somewhere physically." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, telehealth doesn't work if you can't breathe. Good to know. $50 down the drain." Failure moment. It feels like a failure when you have to part ways with something when you don't have any enjoyment with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go to urgent care. Same thing. The thing I had learned there, though, is like, don't let them charge your insurance. Pay cash. It's actually cheaper. I was like, cool, paid cash. So there was one learning failure moment where the first time I got that bill, it was $200. Cash pay was $100. I saved 50% that go around. They're like, no. We don't have a respiratory therapist on staff. You're going to have to go to the hospital. So now I know for future reference, can't breathe? Strider breathing with kids? Directly to the ER. Do not pass anything. Like, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're going straight there, right? Failure moment. The biggest things that I remember learning in my formal education years were through all my failure moments. And our professor did it on purpose.
Yep.
The tenacity of this guy. He gave us tests that were so hard that you had to go do it with friends. I know he did this on purpose, except for the savant in the class who literally aced every test.
Of course. There's always one.
There's always one. And he was 16. You know what I mean? We're all in our 20s.
Oh, so humbling. So humbling.
It's just like, you just don't get it. It was literally 2 lines. We're like, all right, bro. Sorry. But we would, you would literally go in there, you would fail. You would get 3 out of the 6 questions right. And each question would build on it, which is kind of a metaphor for life. Like, everything builds off of the previous question. And then after that, you have the whole weekend basically to go try to figure out how to solve these 6 problems best to your ability with your friends and your peers. It was such a formative moment, though. I loved that professor because amidst the fact that I knew I would go into his test, I had him for 4 classes. He did the same thing on every one of them. Amidst those moments and going and having that like connection with people, we learned so freaking much. I still remember all of his classes. Everything else, I don't remember anything as vividly. But why is that? You know, it is in those failure moments that you're just like, all right, well, if I really wanted it, I had to have failed in the first time. But that you also need an opportunity to kind of be like a phoenix, right? Kind of rise from the ashes of being down. And,
you gotta go to a challenge that's worth you, and that's worth at your capacity, right? Mm-hmm. And when it's worth your capacity, you're meeting at this intersection where it's like you don't know what if you're gonna pass or fail, and that's like where life is like riding it by the horns. You know, you're getting after it at that point, and that's a flow state right there.
Dude, this is why I love like this, and I think like. I'm pretty bullish on books, but here's the other crazy, and I'll even speak to your point, Marcos.
Yeah.
I didn't read my first book until 6 years ago. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 2 decades.
It took me a long time to read too.
1,000 books deep, and I just pick them up, but I don't read them cover to cover. I read till I learn something, and then I have to earn the right to read again. And so it's just this constant process of like learning. But if there's one book that like every human can benefit from, and I have a few, but Michael Easter's The Comfort Crisis.
Yep.
Because it is mind-blowing how often we just believe we are stuck where we are, or that this is just the way, or there's no other way. But really, if you don't put pressure on yourself, the world is going to put pressure and break you.
100%.
But when you put it on yourself, like everyone's like, why do you do the things that you do? And I'm like, because nothing in the world can touch me. Like what? You're going to tell me that I'm going to go bankrupt after I almost lost both my legs and had to learn how to walk again, and they said I never would, and then I tied a world record, or like I've been shot or had blank. I'm like, please, like that's breakfast for me. Send it my way. And at the same time, there was a moment where like I was convinced my life was over. Like I attempted my life 3 times. And here's the raw truth. If I really wanted to kill myself, I would have. I own 100 guns, but I overdosed on purpose because I didn't know how to raise my hand and ask for help. And so I was like, I'll play the line, and if I die, I die. But if I make it, I make it. And I look back at that now, one of the greatest blessings in my life, to be able to talk to people and being able to experience that and like know the deepest, rawest parts of that emotion. But I just feel like we fall into this trap, and we talked about this earlier. We just allow the world to dictate how we feel and how we think, instead of realizing that we have the ability to think and change anything. Like I watched a video yesterday, some fitness dude. His before photo was 64 years old, and he looked like he had a permanent keg installed in his belly. And then at 71, he was doing a 55-inch box jump with a 6-pack. And I was like, oh, goals, like 100%. All day. Yeah. And, you know, like I feel like the mistakes that I made so long is I waited till the world broke me so I had a catalyst to change something, instead of realizing I could just proactively do it every day. And 100%. So the joke that I tell people, I was like, hey, there was a time in my life where every day I had check engine lights on the car, and I was just diagnosed, move on to the next. And they're like, now what is it? I'm like, I wake up and I floor my car into the wall as fast as possible to see what I can break. Yep. Like it's the easiest way to think about it, but everywhere, right? In our health, in our fitness, in our mindset, like with our kids, right? Like Marcos, you have 2 kids?
2. Yep.
Right. So like my daughter's 19 and my son's 7. I feel like now having a 7-year-old, he has a different life than my daughter because I didn't understand how fast it went. I didn't understand how quickly it goes. And so now everyone's like, well, you only work 4 days a week. And I was like, yeah, I'll gladly walk away from an extra $1 million a year to have those moments with my son. And then here's what's funny. That compression and Parkinson's law created more of the result than I would have had before, because we'll fill whatever container we create. But at some point, we got to just choose to stretch a little bit. Yeah. And the stretching, and you nailed it, Marcos, the stretching isn't about the accomplishment. It's about the learning inside of it. And I even have my buddy Mike Rubin, not the one that was the show, another one on my podcast, but his portfolio is worth $70 billion. And I was like, hey, bro, like, let's tell everybody the truth. Why are you successful? He's like, oh, I'll tell you right now. I have failed and made more mistakes than every single one of you, so I just know what not to do right now. and I do this and it works this way, and I do this and it works this way. Like, we just have to be willing to experience and play and try things, right? Like, and Marcos, I'll give you one. I don't know how old your kids were, but when I had my daughter, she threw a temper tantrum in Target, right? And I didn't know what to do as a parent, right? She's on the floor.
Was she asking for a toy? And you said
yeah,
no?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was rough territory. Like, it was like, turn me in. I was like, I'll go back to Afghanistan for a year to avoid this moment for 2 minutes. Like,
dang,
send me back. Like, I was crawling out of my skin. So I look at my ex-wife, and she's like, let's get on the floor with her. And I was like, huh? And she's like, throw a temper tantrum. And then I'm met with like, no way I'm going to throw a temper. And then sure as crap, she gets on the floor. I get on the floor. I throw a temper tantrum. She stops instantly. And then literally all of us had the best laugh, and she never had another one, because kids are just toning their emotions, and I'm over here making it wrong. She was releasing stuff, and I was too afraid and ashamed to get on the floor and do it with her. And that's happened with my son too. And I'm like, why? Because the world tells me I can't. But who says this doesn't work? Like, why not give it a try?
Yeah.
And it's just being in that game that I think is where people win the game, because it also builds your confidence. And you nailed it, Marcos. I know a few professors that are Harvard professors. And when they tell me they do that, it makes my heart happy, because you're not telling somebody what to think. You're teaching them how to think and building the muscle to be able to problem solve. And really what they're doing is they're forcing divergent thinking instead of convergent linear thinking, which is like a massive muscle.
Yeah. I wanted to just say on that, like, that point, I appreciate everything you said there, George. This is why I always feel like both Marcos and I are both logical guys. Logic was like one of my favorite classes but it's a false security of like thinking, in my opinion, because I've started to realize like imagination, as like Einstein said, it is so much more powerful. It's like the eighth wonder, because it truly is. Like, you really can't fathom what is possible for people, but you have to start imagining and start flexing that muscle of like positive imagination. What is possible? You start getting that conversation, and you do it with patients and clients a lot. Marcus and I was like, you know, as a coach, like telling them like, yeah, logically you could lose a pound per week, whatever. But I'm like, imagine the life though. Imagine this, and this, and this, and just like put yourself in that state, you know, when you were like freaking young, dunking on people, eating what you wanted, having the life that you want, like whatever. Imagine, I think that excites people more. That excites me more. And I just feel like life, Marcos and I have been seeing it, dude. Like, we imagined a few things and just put it into fruition, and it's opened doors for us. I was like, I didn't even know that was possible, bro. So let's just keep pushing the narrative. Just keep pushing the narrative. Whatever you imagine, just go do it. And we'll ask for forgiveness if it comes to that.
That's my mantra for sure. Ask for forgiveness, not permission, because everybody, they'll give you all the reasons why you can't do it or you shouldn't. But if you just go do it, and then you show like your competence, or you're competent at that thing, then they're gonna be like, well, we already trained on it. You might as well just do it anyway, right? Like
the deeper question, Marcos, is who are you asking for permission or forgiveness?
Well, that's a good question. I give myself a lot of latitude actually these days. I feel like, are you gonna psychoanalyze me here, George?
No, I'm not. But I'll lead the horse, because this is something that happens. And as coaches, you see this all the time, and I see it too, right? We get into these internal negotiations about decisions we make, and I'm like, who are you negotiating with?
Oh yeah, my ego. No,
and so like here's the thing that I do to my clients, especially like the more money they make, the harder you got to ask the questions, right? Because they have the resources, have everything. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll make this really, really easy. They're like, oh, I'm a failure and this isn't going to work, right? And they're like stuck in that row, or I'm fat forever or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. You have kids? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, would you be willing for me to assemble a jury of your peers to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are right if your kid's life was on the line? And instantaneously, out. And I'm like, yeah, because you have no real evidence. Like, our brain is wired for survival. And so that rumination trap, that's why they say the devil's in the details, because it keeps you out of your heart. And your heart's where the truth is. We already know, or else we wouldn't be thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. But there's this thing too, and like in the personal development world, in the therapy world, in the trauma world, like with, EMDR and, prolonged exposure, the moment we bring it out of our brain and into existence, it neutralizes the charge because we have a different perspective, right? So I always tell people this too. I was like, what are you making decisions about? They're like, oh, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, where are you making it? I was like, are you making it in the cesspool in your brain? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, great. Put it on paper and post it publicly and ask the world what they think. And they're like, oh, I'm like, why not? And I was like, because you're not negotiating. You're looking for a reason to move the starting line.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's the trap. And even at the beginning of the show, we talked about it too. Like, even when you have logic, and logic is the reasoning, what we try to do is we try to logic steps beyond what we can see and control.
Can't intellectualize yourself.
Until you take that first one, right? Everyone's like, oh, I hate the gym. I was like, have you ever been to the gym? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, let's go to the gym.
Yeah, I just had this conversation, George, with like a client yesterday. He's like, Seamus, I want to be honest with you, I have an insecurity. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I sent you those photos, front, side, and back, like you asked. Dude, I just feel that like I'm weak. I don't have power, and like I'm like don't have muscle and stuff. And I like literally just was like, dude, I just looked at your photos. You're shredded to shit. You got veins in your arms. Your abs are showing. And I don't know what you don't feel powerful. You've been doing martial arts classes for like the last few weeks. Like, dude, give it a few more weeks. There's going to be evidence to show that you beat ass. Like, don't worry, bro. You're fine. And he's like, and he just kind of was like, oh, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And then the measuring sticks too, right? Like these false barometers. Like, what are you measuring against? That's why I love that you two said this when you ask people, right? Like when you get them to vivid vision, or you get them to externalize, right? This is what I love about like Benjamin Hardy with Personalities and Permanent, right? But even back in personal development days with LifeSpring and all that stuff, it's like you got to think about what you want your life to look like 6 months in the future and then act as if it's already happening. But you got to have it tied to an outcome to be able to do it. And really what it is like giving yourself an accurate measure that's not dictated by the world, because, you know, the perspective shift is the one that I think everybody lose on. And like, you know, real raw moment here, like it took me 10 years to collapse this in like all my suicide and depression, because when I was in Somalia, I was 20 years old and I'm in genocide, I'm in war. I've seen things and saw things there that I didn't think were humanely possible. And I so compartmentalized out of trauma, like flicking the Marine switch, that when it all came to be, you know, 10 years later, it was hell for like 2 years for me to even understand the amount of cognitive dissonance I had. But then the perspective was like, I remember meeting kids and I would see a group of 10 kids that were 4 years old that had no family and no parents, and they were hustling gum on the side of the road. And that was their life. And they're 4, independent, feeding themselves, operating like it's Lord of the Flies over there. And then I remember meeting an adult and we had ice. They had never seen or knew what ice was. And like, brain broken, like at a level that I can't even understand. And like these internal measuring sticks that we create for ourselves, like where are they coming from? Right? Like what is the actual measure of what it is? And I feel like we don't face reality enough. Maybe you go read Stoicism and understand like you're going to die at any moment. But like right now, it's like even all that internal negotiating, even all that internal rumination is the thing that's getting in the way of us having what we have already, which is the true secret to getting what we want to have, is having gratitude for where we are, right? And I even say this to clients. I'm like, tell me where you want to go. And they're like, oh, I want to be 20 pounds lighter. I want to have another $1 million in my business. I'm like, great. Tell me where you are. They're like, I don't want to know where I am. I'm like, great. Go to your phone and open Google Maps right now. I'm like, all right. I'm like, now type in the destination. I'm like, pick one 1,000 miles away. They're like, all right. And I'm like, hit go. And it says choose starting location. I was like, oh, imagine that. You need to know where you are if you need to know where you want to go. And that's the thing that's trained out of us, right? That's the thing where we're not allowed to have our emotions. We're not allowed to just be okay with where we are. We're not allowed to acknowledge that, like, I'm having a bad day, or I took these photos and maybe I'm not where I want to be, but if I look at them without fault, blame, guilt, or shame, I'm like, oh, look, I have improvements. And I was like, can you imagine if every time a football player, Tom Brady, fumbled, he's like, I'm never playing football again? No, they go analyze the films. They look at every single thing microscopically. But it's a muscle that's not taught to us, and it's conditioned out of us. It blows my mind. Sorry, I rant on that all day.
No, go ahead, Marcos. Yeah.
the yips. Ever heard of the yips, George?
Yeah, I've heard of the yips. Yep.
Where, like in Major League, where he can't throw the ball back to the pitcher. That's what you reminded me of in that last little statement there of like overcoming that.
Well, and I think too, Marcos, even before you riff, like I love how that triggered your brain, because here's the thing that I say to people. I ask them all the time. I'm like, can any of you remember a fortune cookie that you read and remember? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, can any of you remember one from like over 10 years ago? And they're like, yeah, totally. And I was like, do you understand that if you believed that 10 years ago, that your life would be very different now? And they're like, oh my God, yeah. And I think we all forget how overcomplicated we make all of this because of all the things we're inundated with and all the things that we're consumed by. But like really in the lens of fitness, right? Like sleep, move your body, drink more water, and eat a little bit less, right? Like at the end of the day, like that is a simple way to follow it. And even in life, it's like, oh, I don't like my current situation. Amazing. Yeah. What are 3 things that you could do today that if you did every single day would give you a different result 30 days from now, right? And it's this overcomplication of it. And we joke about how simply we can remember it or what movies we remember, but it's really the game of integration. When we integrate those things, we become those things, and it really, really is simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's the opposite of foreshadowing?
Well, like, it's hindsight would be hindsight, foresight, and insight.
Hindsight, foresight, insight? All right. Well, in hindsight, I think if Seamus and I stuck to we'll call them, it's not really a destination postcard, but that's what PN calls it. But it was the same idea that one of our first guests had. So again, like you're like, I love that your brain has been triggered by all these things, and every time you've like said something that's triggered something. Let me go look at that up really quick. I'm gonna go grab that thing, and you got me like interested. And I'm like, one of our very first guests, where it was like probably our best fit performing video for a while, made us do an exercise where we wrote it down, and if we had just stuck to that and kept the cadence that we were doing our podcasting, we'd probably be way further ahead of like maybe even being at a place where there's a little money coming from this, a couple bucks, which would have been really cool. But we chose to grasp onto something else that was a little bit different versus kind of figuring, like, again, like you said, where's our starting destination and where's the destination we want to head to. And I think when we got to that fork in the road, which is inevitable, we're like, oh, like we got to go to the 9 to 5 because they pay us, and that gives us our roof over our head. This isn't there yet. And it kind of sucks. But again, I'm actually going back and like trying to pull up that particular thing because it's like, an identity. It's written in that I am currently, that present tense of those accomplishments. But then it got me thinking again, because like, again, that's how my mind works. Like, you're talking about all these books. I tried to read a book a week last year. I got like 12 done. So I made a good run for the first quarter, which, by the way, George, like, I had read probably 3 books up until that point in my life. If it wasn't a math curriculum textbook, I was not reading it because that's like my brain was like, I don't really want to absorb material. I can listen to stuff all day, no problem, and really absorb that. Combining it with like looking at the text in addition to hearing it, I've actually it's like supercharged. That's my Jim Quick, he's like, you need to learn how to speed read. It's like, that's how I speed read, Jim. Yep. Literally, I had to listen to it at like 3 times the speed, and like I'm hearing it and my eyes can parse it and it's grabbing pertinent stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. But I did pick up that one thing from his book and I never finished it because I do what you do. But this book we did an episode on with Outwitting the Devil. You ever read this
Sharon's a dear friend of mine.
Really?
I'll be with her in 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. So we did this, and then there was, again, like you had talked about, all those particular things or instances that, like, again, like I've never reread a book, so I might go back and do this. It's like, well, what was that about? Why was it so instrumental in like fostering a few things? And the first book I actually dog-eared pages on was this one, which I was like, I hate, I don't know why. Like, again, like I want to keep the integrity of it as if it's never been cracked open, even though I could say I've read it. And if my kids ask, what's that book about? I'm like, oh, I should find out for yourself. But now I'm like, if I can leave little spoilers, like of like, oh, Dad read this book to my kids, and then they're like, why did he find this page so fascinating? You know what I mean? Maybe the next time I'll highlight some stuff. I don't know, like, but just little things, right? And got me thinking again, because you keep on bringing up good moments within this, and I forget what it was that triggered this. So now it feels like it was too far back. and I have to go circle back to that parallel story too, and then we can finish up. All right, here it was, right? In the rest of the book, the 7 principles to attain spiritual, mental, and physical freedom, right? So you're asking your people these questions all the time, right? Definitive of purpose, mastery over self, learning from adversity, controlling environmental influence, time, harmony, caution. Yep. Those are the 7 things you need, right?
Yep.
Okay. Like, again, time. I struggle with giving stuff enough time. That's been like my biggest thing. Like you just said, if I just followed those things and gave it 6 months, what would happen? Told my wife, hey, like, and everybody learns at a different cadence. I've learned this from her. Like, why am I going to force her into my box? Yeah. Right? I can't do that. But then she came to me and she's like, what do you think of this? I'm like, you're reanalyzing the fact that you haven't had a person in your chair on any Tuesday over the last year. Took you to like get to the renewal of the lease before we had a conversation about like, what do you think about me cutting my days back to 2? And I was like, I mean, your profit's better technically because you don't have to pay as much out. You have lower costs. Why wouldn't you do it? Right. Mm-hmm. But that's how, like, again, like she has like, I need to see these things through type of mentality. I'm like, what am I cutting? What am I trimming the fat of right now? Because I don't need this. It's superfluous. It's nonsense.
You're an optimizer, Marcos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I try to be, right? But then I'm like, oh, wow. And then I go, that's why I told that story about her in the beginning where it's like the first time where she's really made progress in her own business. I mean, she obviously, she's like, it makes it seem like you just want me to go back to cocktailing where money was easy, Marcos. I'm like, no, I don't want that. I want you to, she hasn't learned from her mistakes yet, but I've learned some from mine and I can't give those to her, but I can be more patient with things, right? So, I mean, a lot of these things is like time is really like the greatest mentor and teacher too, especially in relationships. I mean, I've been with her for 7 years now. She still bugs me. I still hit her with the same jokes and the same moves, babe. So, why are you gonna wow me? Why are you gonna wow me? I was like, if I came back with some new moves in the bedroom, babe, you'd be like, where'd you learn these? Yeah. I'm sorry. I still have like, you still make me shy. You still make me feel like when we first met, and those feelings are always there. But so, okay. The crazy thing that you also mentioned about trying something with your diet, you're like, I'm going to pick this calorie total. You picked walking. I know this is like a big circle back to that. You picked these things, and I know they're not arbitrary because you probably used a calculator or used some of your personal knowledge of, nutrition.
It was just personal knowledge. I just guessed. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what happens, I'm going to see it through. I need to see it through. Right. And I think a lot of people can learn from that. How long did you do something before you made changes with like your movement? How long were you making changes with, because you said that was the only variable that was it.
The only thing I adjusted was steps. And so I did 2-week sprints. And so I did 2 weeks, and then I was like, let me increase it. And then sure as crap. And then one day I showed up at an event that I was facilitating and I got really lightheaded and I was like, why? And I took my shirt off. They're like, you have veins in your abs. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm a little too lean. Maybe I should eat some more or reduce some steps. Right. And you make a good point, Marcos, and I'm gonna tie a few things together just because I know we're getting near the end, but also we've talked so much about like habit changes and belief changes and identity changes, right? And I like to simplify things. What we're really talking about is you tell me you want brownies for dinner, so you mix the batter and you put them in the oven for a minute and you get upset that you don't have brownies to eat. And at the end of the day, the container needs to be dictated by the recipe that's being followed or the goals that we're trying to achieve. And in my opinion, and this is just straight experience, like I've literally coached thousands of entrepreneurs. I've scaled companies to billions. I own 7 of my own that are all in, 7-8 figures. Like, this is not a joke. Everybody overvalues intensity and undervalues consistency. And it's why we lose the game. And so I even made a model for my clients, and I call it the wedge of expectations. So like, let's say in your 7, buckets from outwitting the devil, or let's say time management or my movement or whatever.
You can take our 5 pillars, actually, George. We have family, fitness, finance,
there you go.
Focus, and what was the last one, Seamus?
Food.
Oh, perfect. This is actually that's even better. So taking your 5, right? Under each one of those, you probably have 1 to 3 behaviors that if you put them on paper and follow the plan, you are a byproduct of what you want. This is where people lose. They make a plan on their best day and never plan for their worst day. So the moment they miss one, they collect subconscious evidence that it doesn't work, and then it gets them out of consistency. Yeah. So I made a model called the wedge of expectation. So let's say under family, you're like, I'm going to do an hour at night with my wife, one-on-one, me and her, every single night. Number one, no, you're not. Liar, and you already know. So on your best day, what you ask is your ceiling, and you're like, okay, on my best day, what do I want? You're like, I want an hour uninterrupted time with my wife at night. You have 2 kids, good luck, okay? But that's your best day.
I know.
Then I ask you a second question. I say, on your absolute worst day, when your business went bankrupt, your kid ended up in the ER, you got blank, blank, and blank, but you know you're not going to quit, and you want that result, what's the minimum you can commit to protect your progress? That's your floor. And for every behavior, you make a ceiling and a floor. And your job is to protect your floors every single day. So let's say under movement, you're like, I want to do 10,000 steps a day, or I want to go for an hour walk outside. Amazing.
Yep.
It might get 11:30. You had a breakdown that day, and you're like, oh, I'm not going. But if your floor is 5 minutes outside and you protect that consistency, here's the thing I know. When you start walking for 5 minutes, you think you're only going to walk for 5 minutes?
You're going to do 10 or 15. You're going to do a few more. You're going to get closer to your
So when I
minimum.
started losing the weight and kept it off, I know I can get up early. I was a Marine for years, right? And I despised it. Like, I revolted against it because for 13 years of my life, I was up at 3:30 in the morning. And so I just made a rule for myself that my ceiling was, I'm going to go to the gym for an hour a day, 5 days a week. That was my ceiling. My floor was, I'm going to drive to the gym parking lot by 7 a.m., 5 days a week. In that first 30 days, I did not go in the gym 6 times. I cried in my car one day. I listened to a podcast another day. I watched a Kill Tony episode another day because I really wasn't feeling like going in the gym. But the craziest thing happened is I protected my consistency and momentum. And now, you know, a year later, it's who I am. Like, I wake up without an alarm clock. My red light's done. My steps are done. My smoothie's done. My supplements are done. My meals are prepped. And I don't even have to think about it anymore because I don't have any evidence that I can't do it. I just built on top of what's there. So even as podcasters, right? We know recording podcasts move the needle. And we know bro time's important for you. Let's say your ceiling is we want to do 2 podcast episodes a week. Great. Well, life happens. What's the minimum we can commit to? We'll FaceTime twice a week for 10 minutes to brainstorm ideas because you're protecting your progress. And so you have to add a ceiling and a floor for every behavior, and then you protect the floor. And I promise you, no matter what habit, what life, I made that model, it has worked for everybody.
Dang. Protect your floor. Protect your floor. That's freaking, oh man. Well, I think that's a perfect part to kind of parse out. And George, man, freaking epic. I don't even think we got into it, but we'll definitely have to highlight these things at the end here. George, what can people do to work with you? I know you've got an event coming up. Can you just kind of floor those out real fast? And dude, thank you so much for the time, man.
Oh, dude, this was a blast. I would do this with you guys anytime. You ever want to do round 2, round 3? Let me know, and then we'll
probably have to do we'll probably do an inverse,
Yeah, we'll reverse, and I'll get you guys on my show. It was an honor. And, you know, for everybody listening to this, like, here's the one thing I'll say, and I don't even care to talk about myself. The biggest mistake people make is they let conversations like this become shelf help. And if you heard this for a reason. And don't overcomplicate it. Don't swing for the fences. Whatever tickled the most, just take it and give it a chance to cook in the oven. That one thing makes all the difference, right? And my job's to help. And so if I can help you in any way, I don't care if you ever give me your credit card. I don't care if you ever listen to my podcast. I just care that you get a different result in your life. And so in my world, we talk about mindset, customer journey when it comes to business, and relationships, especially the one with yourself. And so my Instagram is It's George Bryant. The It's is included. The realtor in Michigan that's like 82 years old has the other one. He gets mad at me all the time. It's George Bryant. And then if you want to see the pinkest website in the world, it's mindofgeorge.com. And on there is my podcast. Everything's given away for free. The link to our event, which we help entrepreneurs. But genuinely, if I can answer any question, if I can help you in any way, you have access to me. I will send you a video message back. Just DM me anything. on Instagram. If I know somebody, I'll intro you. If I have a resource, I'll send it to you. I genuinely just want to help you. And so I just thank you for listening. And if you don't like my slice of crazy, you're welcome. I'm not changing. Best of luck. I'll still be here when you decide to come back, and I'll still be the same. But like, genuinely, guys, like, it was an honor to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, really appreciate it, man. Definitely. We always say this. Our word of the podcast is serendipity, or at least Seamus's is. I gotta pick my own. But yeah, man, truly. Thanks again. Thank you for your service. Thank you for all the insight. Thank you for obviously the other things that like get my mind turning. Cause I think, again, we've talked about this. We do this kind of semi-selfishly because we want to learn from other people. Yeah, we really do. We'll be completely transparent to people. Like, this is interactions with people are selfishly for us. And if other people want to listen and tune in and they get something out of it, then dope. Right. And I think that anybody that's like probably really high up in this game, they're doing something in a similar way. Like, that person, something they said resonated with me, and we need to talk to them. You know, it's like the cheat code, right? We're just like, oh, you got us thinking about it. We're gonna go now. We're probably gonna go dive into your material and then become raving fans again, and you know. But
and genuinely, if I can help you two with anything, please just reach out. Anything you catch, anything you need. Man. Like, you got a bro in your corner, so I'm in.
All right, we'll hold you to that. But yeah, the round 2, we'll definitely get that. I think this one, as our first episode with people always is, it's a little chaotic in a good way. It talks about things that are more real. We don't like having an agenda because then it feels like we're having talking points. And I've had some episodes, and Jameis can probably remember those too, or we've had some episodes, not I. But I felt like, oh man, this person's giving like the sales pitch of who they are again, and it kind of turned them off. And I was like, fuck, like that was not the intention. We want to know more about why they think that way.
The real you, the way you came in today.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah, authentically crazy, you know, slice of crazy. We love that. And yeah, everybody that's made it this far, I can give you the TLDL, like too long didn't listen version of this. You know, you gotta figure out your ceilings and your floors, and your floors are your bare ass minimums. And I love that you said at the end here, because there's always that little voice in your head at the end of the day, especially for us in the health coaching space. Did I hit all my key movers to help me with my body and my mindset and my whatever it is? You know, is it because of the checklist and I needed 3 of 5 and all those things? That floor, I think, is so monumentally helpful for so many people, myself included. And, you know, you don't have to overcomplicate things. You just got to build that consistency. So really figure out those floors. I'll tell you mine with movement. My bare ass minimums is like, I don't like to see my floor get below 8K on a given day. Whereas I then parse out and move further to look at how weekly averages look. Seamus, what's the floor for you? So we can end on that.
I'm at 9 right now, and it's going hard. But like right now, my floor, it's not really on movement because I know my movement's getting locked in. But I've just been hitting my protein. That I was like, dude, just get my protein in. Carbs and fats can go crazy right now because I'm really hitting training hard. That's it right now. Because the plan, honestly, is I got 6 races, high rocks and stuff across the next 6 months. And I'm like, you know what? It's probably going to be fine if I eat more or whatever, you know, so it'll be good. But yeah, George, really high level conversation. We'll definitely do a part 2. For those that are listening, guys, like we said, find your floor, hit your ceiling, play with it, and stay consistent. Other than that, macro perspective peeps, we are out.